The story begins with the wealthy protagonist stepping into a situation that seems ordinary. Still, it quickly turns uncomfortable as he is humiliated by a woman who perceives him as nothing more than a lowly worker. He is caught off guard, his discomfort evident but controlled, setting the tone for the power imbalance that will define their relationship. The woman appears confident, possibly smug, thinking little of the man she encounters. The narrative begins to hint at the differences in their worlds, with emotional tension brewing between them. The encounter is brief, but leaves a lasting mark on both characters, foreshadowing future conflict. She immediately judges him based on superficial appearances, dismissing his social status or mocking his situation. Her words are sharp, and the wealth disparity is impossible to ignore. He tries to hide his feelings but internally struggles with humiliation. His embarrassment is raw, and this encounter will have repercussions on his self-esteem. As he quietly endures the verbal assault, the contrast between her careless behavior and his quiet resilience creates a palpable tension. Their interaction is brief, but its emotional weight is heavy, planting the seed for future struggles. As the conversation continues, she grows more comfortable in her judgment of him, increasing his sense of discomfort. The power dynamics become increasingly obvious, with her being fully aware of her social privilege and using it to belittle him. His internal conflict grows, and despite his attempts to stay composed, he's beginning to unravel inside. His mind races with self-doubt as he questions his value in her eyes. This brief but loaded encounter builds the emotional core of the story, marking the beginning of an animosity that will evolve. There is a stark power imbalance from the outset. She holds all the cards, while he is left struggling with his position. The initial humiliation is followed by a sense of helplessness on his part, leaving him feeling small and unimportant. The story explores the emotional toll this interaction has on him, and how he silently accepts the sting of her words. She, on the other hand, remains oblivious to the damage caused, wrapped up in her worldview. Her casual cruelty is an early indicator of the deep-rooted issues she will face later in the story. Following the encounter, both characters are left to reflect on what transpired. He wrestles with the pain of being humiliated, but also resolves not to let this be the defining moment of his life. She, on the other hand, likely forgets the encounter, or brushes it off as inconsequential. The difference in their emotional responses speaks volumes about their personalities and sets the stage for future conflict. He begins to plan his next steps, fueled by a desire for change and revenge, while she goes about her life unaware of the long-lasting effect she's had on him. After the humiliating encounter, the protagonist faces the harsh reality of his situation. With no clear direction and burdened by the shame of that day, he decides to take control of his life and begin again from the bottom. He starts by accepting a series of odd jobs, working tirelessly day and night, often facing setbacks and failures. There are moments of doubt, where he questions if he will ever be able to escape the life of struggle that he finds himself in, but each time, he pushes through. His experiences begin to shape his character. The humiliation from the past continues to fuel his desire to succeed. As he slowly builds a reputation in the field he's chosen, he also builds a new identity, one that's forged from the pain of his past. In contrast, the woman who humiliated him goes about her life without even knowing the impact she had. She remains in her world of privilege, unaware that a storm is quietly brewing on the horizon. Over the years, the protagonist's hard work pays off as he starts to see some success, but it's never without sacrifice. His relationships suffer, and he often feels isolated, pushing people away in his pursuit of greatness. Despite this, he remains resolute, driven by the memory of that first encounter, and the desire to show her, and the world, that he's more than the man she once saw. As the years pass, his resolve strengthens, and the wounds of his past begin to transform into motivation. He grows into a man of influence and power, preparing for a future that will not just change his life, but the lives of those around him. The idea of revenge starts to take root in his mind, and he vows that when the time is right, he will have the last word. Meanwhile, she continues her life, unaware that her judgment of him years ago will come back to haunt her. The contrast between their two paths, his rise from nothing and her continued life of luxury, sets the stage for the inevitable collision that will come. The protagonist, now years removed from the painful memory of his past, finds himself in a position he never imagined. The struggles of his early years have paid off, and he's finally achieved the level of success he once dreamed of. The company he's built from scratch is flourishing, and he now controls an empire that he alone built through sheer determination and hard work. His reputation has grown to be one of respect, and his presence commands attention in every room he enters. With the newfound power comes a sense of fulfillment, but also a reminder of how far he's come from those days of humiliation. As his empire grows, he begins to take on more responsibility, strategically expanding into new markets, making key alliances, and gaining influence over both competitors and colleagues alike. However, in the back of his mind, there's always the thought of the woman who once mocked him. Despite his success, there's a need for closure and a thirst for justice. He wants her to see what he has become, to realize the man she once humiliated is now far beyond anything she could have imagined. In a twist of fate, they cross paths again. Their encounter is like no other. She, now a part of the upper echelons of society, is unaware of how much he has changed. To her, he's still the man she once looked down upon, though now he's not the same man at all. As he looks at her, the anger that once burned inside him is replaced with a new sense of power. He no longer feels the need to prove anything, but something inside him shifts. The power dynamics between them are reversed at that moment, and he realizes he holds all the cards. Her once high position in life is no longer the source of her strength. The scene plays out with tension, as she begins to notice the shift in his demeanor, the confidence in his eyes, and the strength he now carries in his presence. They engage in a conversation that feels almost surreal to him, one that contrasts with their previous encounters, where she would have never given him the time of day. He stands tall, composed, and in control, while she stumbles through her words. Her embarrassment is palpable, but for the first time in years, he realizes he doesn't need her approval. This encounter marks a turning point in his life, as the final pieces fall into place. The past is no longer a source of pain, but a source of motivation. The man who once struggled for acceptance now commands the respect of everyone around him. The power shift is complete. But as the woman tries to recover from the shock of seeing him in this new light, the protagonist realizes that his true battle lies ahead, not in seeking revenge, but in understanding what to do with the power he now holds. The power shift represents more than just his success. It represents the triumph of perseverance, self-reliance, and redemption. He knows now that he must decide how to wield the influence he has so carefully cultivated, and what role his past will continue to play in shaping his future. Years had passed, and the protagonist's life had evolved far beyond the bitter past he once knew. The painful memories of his early years, the days he had spent struggling and climbing the ladder of success, were now distant echoes. He had transformed from the naive and humiliated man into a powerful force in the business world. His company was now a well-established empire, respected and feared by competitors alike. Yet, despite all of his achievements, something inside him had always remained unsettled. He had built a new life, but the echoes of the past lingered, and there was one unresolved chapter he had never closed: his encounter with her. It had been years since the humiliating moment when she looked down on him, treating him like an insignificant nobody. The bitterness of that encounter never truly faded. The sting of being belittled, mocked, and dismissed had been a part of him for too long. But as fate would have it, life had a curious way of bringing people back into your orbit when you least expected it. One evening, as he sat in his office overlooking the sprawling city skyline, the phone rang. It was a call from his secretary, informing him of an unexpected visitor at the front desk. It was her, the very woman who had humiliated him all those years ago. She had come to his office, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. His first reaction was one of disbelief. He had worked so hard to put that chapter behind him, to build something far bigger and more important than that fleeting moment of pain. And yet, there she was, standing in his lobby, looking just as he remembered. Maybe even more beautiful, certainly more polished. The sharp lines of her well-tailored suit contrasted with the frailty he had once seen in her. She was no longer the confident woman who had sneered at him from her high position in society. She was now a mere visitor in his world, a world he had created through blood, sweat, and tears. The thought of her presence in his life once again stirred something deep inside him, a mixture of confusion, anger, and a strange sense of satisfaction. He instructed his secretary to send her in, his mind racing with what to say, how to act, and whether to even acknowledge the past. When she entered his office, their eyes locked for the first time in years. The air between them was thick with tension. She stood at the door, unsure whether to approach or to wait for his direction. His gaze was steady, unflinching, and for the first time, he wasn't the man who had to fight for her approval. He was the man who commanded respect. She seemed taken aback by the change in him, the difference in his demeanor, the palpable aura of power that surrounded him. Her voice faltered slightly as she greeted him, but he remained silent, letting the weight of the silence fill the room. It was almost as if she was seeing him for the first time, unsure of how to navigate the new dynamic between them. Slowly, she took a seat across from him, and the conversation began, though it was anything but normal. She was there for business, of course. She had no idea that he was the one she would be meeting. She had come to discuss a potential collaboration between her company and his, something that required mutual respect and understanding. Yet, as the words fell from her lips, there was an underlying tension, a history they both couldn't ignore. She spoke of her success, the growth of her company, and how she had finally found her footing in the corporate world. But there was something different in the way she spoke now, something more vulnerable, more human. Gone was the arrogance that had once defined her every move. Instead, she was nervous, uncertain, and perhaps even a little intimidated by the man who now sat across from her. As the conversation continued, he couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led him here. The countless nights spent working himself to the bone, the moments of doubt, and the sacrifices he had made along the way. He had built his empire with the determination to never be seen as weak again, to never be looked down upon. And now, as he listened to her speak, he realized that the tables had turned. She was no longer the powerful figure in their relationship. He was. The power dynamic had shifted, and it was almost surreal. At some point during the conversation, she mentioned something that struck him. Something about how her life had changed, how she had learned humility, and how the success she had achieved felt hollow at times. It wasn't the first time he'd heard someone express such sentiments, but it was strange to hear it from her, the woman who had once thought so little of him. As she spoke, he listened intently, trying to discern whether her words were genuine or just a facade. But in that moment, something shifted within him. The pain of the past, the anger he had once held, began to dissipate. It was clear now that the past wasn't as relevant as it once seemed. The years of hardship, of struggling to prove himself, had forged him into someone far stronger than the person who had once sat at the bottom of the social ladder. And in that strength, he realized that he no longer needed to hold on to the past. The woman in front of him was no longer the person who had humiliated him. She was someone who had experienced her struggles, her journey, and now, they stood on equal ground. The reunion wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about recognizing the journey they had both taken and the people they had become. As the conversation wound down, they exchanged business cards, and she stood to leave. Before she exited, she turned to him, and almost as if she had read his thoughts, said, "You've changed." He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "So have you." With that, she left his office, leaving him to reflect on the encounter. In the weeks that followed, their professional relationship would evolve, but the emotional undercurrent of their first meeting never truly faded. They were no longer defined by their past selves, but by the people they had become through the challenges they had faced. The reunion, unexpected as it was, had marked the beginning of a new chapter for both of them, one where they could move forward, no longer bound by the ghosts of the past, but by the promise of what lay ahead. The first few days after the reunion were filled with tension as they began working together. The balance of power was precarious, and both of them were aware that it would only be a matter of time before the old dynamics would surface. The woman who had once humiliated him now sat across from him in meetings, discussing business plans, strategies, and goals. But beneath the surface, there was an undeniable struggle for control, a silent battle between the two of them that neither could ignore. It was a strange feeling for him, having her back in his life, especially in this professional setting. For years, he had fought to build his reputation, to create a space where his voice mattered. And now, she was in the room again, challenging him in subtle ways. It was as if their past had never truly gone away, lingering in the air like an unspoken tension. The first test of authority came when they were working on a major business deal. Both of their companies were involved, and the stakes were high. They were seated across from each other, each one trying to make their point, pushing their own agendas. His company was at the forefront of the deal, but she was determined to prove that her ideas, her approach, were better. It wasn't just about the deal anymore. It was about control. It was about who could lead the conversation, who could influence the direction of the deal. He noticed how she would interrupt him, presenting her ideas before he could finish speaking, as if she was trying to assert dominance. It was a tactic he recognized, one that he had used in the past when he was trying to get his voice heard in a world that ignored him. But now, the roles were reversed. He was the one in control, and she was trying to reclaim some of the authority she had once had over him. For a moment, he was tempted to give in, to let her have her way. But he quickly reminded himself of how far he had come. The man who had once been overlooked was now a powerful figure in the business world. He wasn't about to let her walk all over him again, not after everything he had worked for. So, he stood his ground. He spoke calmly, confidently, making his case in a way that demanded respect. And for the first time in their new dynamic, he saw her hesitate. It was subtle, but it was there. A brief moment where she realized that things had changed. The power had shifted, and she could no longer control the situation with her usual tactics. But that moment of hesitation quickly passed, and she came back stronger, trying once again to assert herself. The back and forth continued for hours, with neither of them willing to back down. The tension was palpable, the atmosphere in the room charged with the unspoken history between them. But despite her attempts, he could see that she was starting to realize that this was no longer the same situation. He wasn't the man she had once looked down on. He wasn't the one who had been intimidated by her. He was now the one who commanded respect. The first test of authority was more than just a power struggle in the boardroom. It was a test of their entire relationship, of everything that had happened between them. He wasn't just trying to win this deal. He was proving something to himself. He was proving that he had earned his place at the table, that he was not going to let anyone, especially her, take that away from him. As the day went on, the tension between them grew, but so did his sense of confidence. Each time she challenged him, he met her with an even stronger resolve. He wasn't going to back down, and he wasn't going to let her undermine his authority. But just when he thought the power struggle was reaching its peak, something unexpected happened. In the middle of a heated discussion, she paused. For a moment, she looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted. It was as if she realized that this wasn't the same person she had known all those years ago. He wasn't the weak, humiliated man she had once mocked. He was someone completely different, someone who had fought for everything he had and wasn't going to let anyone take it from him. She softened, just a little, and for the first time in their professional interaction, she listened. It was a small shift, but it was significant. The power struggle didn't end with a definitive victory, but it did end with a new understanding between them. There was a mutual respect now, one that hadn't existed before. She realized that he was no longer someone to be underestimated. He was a force to be reckoned with, and she couldn't just push him around anymore. The business deal they were working on eventually came to a successful conclusion, but the underlying power struggle was the real victory. He had proven to himself and to her that he was in control of his destiny. Their relationship would never be the same, and that was okay. They both understood now that the past was just that, the past. What mattered now was who they were in this moment, and how they could move forward. The first test of authority had been passed, and though it had been difficult, it had been necessary. It had solidified the new dynamic between them, one where both of them could stand on equal footing. But the question remained. What would happen next? The power struggle had only just begun, and neither of them knew where it would lead. But one thing was certain. Their relationship was no longer defined by who they once were. It was now shaped by the people they had become. As time passed, something shifted in him. The man who had once been dismissed, the one who had faced the harsh sting of humiliation, began to realize just how far he had come. The world he had once felt excluded from had opened its doors to him, and he had stepped through them, leaving his past behind. But now, amid this power struggle with the woman who had once looked down on him, he had a sudden clarity. He had grown. It wasn't just in terms of wealth or success. It was in his mindset, in his ability to navigate the complexities of life with grace and strategy. He had been tested so many times, each trial shaping him into someone new. He wasn't the man he had been during that first humiliating encounter with her, nor was he the man who had been uncertain and afraid to take control of his future. Now, he was a man who understood his worth, and that understanding gave him the ability to approach situations from a completely new perspective. The power he had gained in the business world was just a reflection of the growth he had experienced inside. He wasn't the desperate man anymore, clinging to whatever scraps he could find. He had learned the art of patience, of choosing his battles wisely, of knowing when to fight and when to step back. It was a transformation that had taken years, and it had been painful at times. But it had been necessary. His growth wasn't just about achieving external success. It was about the internal strength that had emerged from the struggle. He no longer saw the world as a place that was constantly working against him. He had learned that the key to survival wasn't fighting against the world, but understanding how to play within it. The first major sign of this shift came during a particularly tough meeting. The woman he had once feared, the one who had humiliated him without hesitation, was in the room, trying to assert control. There was a moment when he could feel the old emotions rising within him, the anger, the resentment, the need to prove himself. But instead of reacting impulsively, he took a deep breath. He paused. And then, he made his move. It wasn't about raising his voice or asserting dominance. It was about using his knowledge, his experience, and his quiet confidence to guide the conversation in the direction he wanted. He spoke with authority. But it was a calm, measured authority that didn't need to rely on force. The woman, who had once dismissed him, seemed to realize at that moment that he was no longer the same person. She no longer held the power over him that she once had. It wasn't about defeating her. It was about showing that he was capable of standing his ground. Not out of anger, but out of a quiet sense of self-respect. As the days went on, this newfound perspective became clearer. He started to see that his past, painful as it had been, had shaped him into someone who understood the value of resilience. He had learned not just to survive, but to thrive. And that understanding made him more powerful than any wealth or position ever could. He began to see the woman not as someone who had wronged him, but as a person who, in her way, had contributed to his growth. She had pushed him, unintentionally, to become better, to prove himself, to rise above the challenges. It wasn't about revenge or getting even. It was about recognizing the role that every person, every situation, had played in shaping who he had become. As he reflected on his growth, he realized that the man who had once craved validation was no longer dependent on it. He had found his worth within himself, and that internal validation was all he needed. It allowed him to approach life with a sense of calm and assurance that he had never known before. He no longer feared failure or rejection. He had experienced both and had come out stronger on the other side. The fear of not being enough had dissipated, replaced with the knowledge that he was enough, just as he was. This new perspective had begun to influence every aspect of his life, from his business decisions to his relationships. He no longer viewed his past failures as obstacles, but as stepping stones that had paved the way to his current success. He saw every challenge, every setback, as an opportunity for growth. He had learned to take risks, to trust in himself, and to believe that he could shape his future. His relationship with the woman had shifted as well. No longer was there an underlying bitterness or a need for validation. There was simply respect. They both understood that they had changed, that they had grown into different versions of themselves. They were no longer defined by their past, but by the people they had become. For him, this growth was liberating. It gave him the freedom to make decisions based on what he truly wanted, not on the fear of what might happen if he failed. He had learned that failure was not the end, but merely a part of the journey. As he looked back on everything he had been through, he realized that he had become the person he had always wanted to be. He was strong, confident, and capable of handling whatever life threw his way. And more importantly, he had learned that true success was not just about money or status. It was about finding peace within himself. The growth he had experienced was not just about external achievements. It was about the internal transformation that had taken place. He had learned to value himself, to trust his instincts, and to understand that he was worthy of the success he had earned. The woman, who had once been a symbol of his struggle, now stood as a reminder of how far he had come. Their dynamic had changed, and so had he. The man who had once been desperate for approval now stood confidently in his power, no longer needing anyone else's validation. He had found his place in the world, and he was no longer afraid to take up space. This growth, this new perspective, was the true victory. And it was something no one could take from him. As the man continued to grow, his transformation became undeniable. He had risen from his past struggles and now stood on his own 2 feet, commanding respect and success. But for the woman who had once humiliated him, this shift was nothing short of a challenge. The ego that had once fueled her sense of superiority now began to shake, as she realized that the man she had so easily dismissed was no longer beneath her. This was something she had never anticipated. How could the man she had humiliated have turned into someone so powerful, so confident, so capable of navigating the world with ease? It made her uncomfortable. The discomfort wasn't just from the shifting dynamics of their relationship. It was the confrontation with her ego. She had always thought herself superior to him, and perhaps in some ways she had been. She was wealthy, successful, and used to controlling situations. But now, she was forced to confront the fact that all of this meant little when it came to true growth and true self-worth. His rise had exposed a vulnerability in her that she wasn't used to acknowledging. For the first time in years, she found herself questioning her place in the world. It wasn't just about status or wealth anymore. It was about something deeper, something that had nothing to do with her external achievements. She had built her life around the idea that power came from having more than others, from controlling situations, from being the one who dictated the narrative. But here was a man who had nothing to his name when she had first met him. And now he stood with the same power she had spent a lifetime accumulating. This discrepancy made her uneasy. The more she tried to ignore the internal turmoil, the more it became clear. Her ego was standing in the way of her personal growth. She had relied on her sense of superiority for so long that she hadn't stopped to question whether it was holding her back. Her initial attitude of dismissing others, especially the man she had humiliated, had been a defense mechanism. It had been a way for her to protect herself from the vulnerability of showing weakness. In a world that valued success and dominance, showing any kind of vulnerability was considered a flaw. But now, as she saw the man she had once looked down on become more successful than she had ever imagined, she began to question everything she had believed in. Was her ego the key to her success? Or was it just a shield she had used to protect herself from the truth? Her struggle was not just with him anymore. It was with herself. She was torn between wanting to maintain the control she had always had, and the realization that true growth came from being open to change. The man's growth had illuminated a part of her that she had never wanted to face. He had become someone who could navigate challenges without relying on others to validate him. He had found his worth, and now she was struggling to find hers. The more she observed him, the more she felt the weight of her limitations. His confidence wasn't based on what he owned or what others thought of him. He was confident because he had learned to trust himself. The woman, on the other hand, had built her identity around external validation. She realized she had used her wealth and status to mask the insecurities that had always haunted her. For years, she had been terrified of anyone seeing through her facade, of revealing her vulnerability. But now, with the man's rise to power, she found herself at a crossroads. She could either continue to cling to the ego that had gotten her this far, or she could finally face her fears and allow herself to evolve. The choice was daunting. Letting go of her ego meant relinquishing the control she had spent years cultivating. It meant acknowledging that there was more to life than just external success. It meant confronting the reality that, despite all her wealth and status, she still had deep emotional wounds that needed healing. She wasn't just fighting against the man's success. She was fighting against her sense of identity. Her struggle was one of pride and vulnerability, of needing to be right while also knowing deep down that her ego was preventing her from experiencing true growth. She had to decide whether to remain in the comfort of her old ways or embrace the discomfort of self-improvement. Every interaction with the man felt like a test of her ego. He no longer saw her as someone to be impressed by her wealth or status. He saw her as a person who was still clinging to old beliefs, still shackled by the need to be in control. He treated her with respect, not because of what she had achieved, but because of who she was becoming. In those moments, the woman was forced to reckon with the realization that true strength came from within. It wasn't about proving yourself to others, but about proving to yourself that you were capable of growth. She began to notice how the man no longer sought her approval. He no longer needed validation from anyone, especially her. This was a humbling experience for her. She had always been the one who had held the power in their interactions. But now, she saw how much she had been driven by the need to dominate. She realized that her ego, her constant need to be in control, was a weakness. She had built walls around herself to protect her fragile sense of self-worth. But now she was learning that true strength came from vulnerability, from being willing to admit that you didn't have all the answers, and that you could learn from others. The struggle between her ego and her desire for growth became the central conflict in her life. She could continue to fight for control, but she knew, deep down, that it would never bring her the peace she craved. She needed to break free from the need for dominance and embrace the idea that life wasn't a competition. As she reflected on her past and present, she realized that it wasn't too late to change. She didn't need to be the person who had everything under control all the time. It was okay to be imperfect, to show vulnerability, and to embrace change. For the first time, she understood what true power looked like. It wasn't about being above others. It was about being at peace with yourself and allowing yourself to grow. This internal battle, though painful, was the beginning of a new chapter for her. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but it was a journey she had to take. And just like the man she had once humiliated, she had to find the strength to face her vulnerabilities and grow from them. As time passed, the atmosphere between the man and the woman began to shift. The intense tension that had once marked their interactions began to give way to something more complicated, something that neither of them had anticipated. At first, it was subtle. There were moments when their eyes would meet, lingering a little longer than usual, followed by awkward silences. A sense of discomfort would creep in, but neither of them could deny the growing undercurrent between them. The man, once determined to prove himself, was now starting to feel things he hadn't expected. He noticed the way she would smile at him when they shared a casual conversation, the softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. He saw how her walls, built so high and strong for years, were starting to crumble in subtle ways. For the first time, he saw her as someone more than just the woman who had humiliated him. She was becoming someone he couldn't ignore. For the woman, This shift was even more unsettling. She had always been in control, her ego firmly in place. But now, with each passing day, she found herself drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. He was no longer the man she had once looked down upon. He had become someone who intrigued her, someone who seemed to challenge her beliefs, and perhaps even her heart. She tried to push these feelings away, dismissing them as nothing more than a temporary weakness, a fleeting attraction. But no matter how much she tried to deny it, she couldn't shake the growing awareness of him in her life. Their interactions, once businesslike and distant, slowly began to carry an emotional weight. They would find themselves talking about things beyond their professional lives, discovering shared interests and common experiences that had nothing to do with their status or positions. The conversations were casual at first, but there was a depth in them that neither of them had anticipated. The man, whose world had once been about survival and success, now found himself talking about his childhood, his dreams, and even his fears. The woman, whose life had been built around control and appearances, found herself opening up about her vulnerabilities and insecurities, things she had never shared with anyone before. It was through these small moments of connection that their relationship began to evolve. What started as curiosity and tension slowly turned into something deeper. The more they spoke, the more they realized how much they could understand each other. The man, once bitter and angry, now began to see the woman as someone who had her struggles, her fears. And the woman, who had once seen him as beneath her, began to admire his strength, resilience, and the way he had rebuilt his life. She saw in him a man who had grown in ways she hadn't imagined, a man who was no longer afraid to challenge her and stand his ground. At the same time, both of them struggled with the complexities of their feelings. The man was torn between the desire to pursue the relationship and the fear that it might make him vulnerable again. He had been hurt before, and the last thing he wanted was to open himself up to someone who might break his heart. The woman, too, grappled with her emotions. Her pride and ego told her to remain distant, to protect herself from getting too attached, while a quieter, more vulnerable part of her longing for a deeper connection. She had spent so many years guarding herself from being hurt that the thought of letting her guard down seemed terrifying. The attraction between them grew in intensity, and with each passing day, the emotional connection deepened. There were moments of tenderness, small gestures like him holding the door for her, or her offering him a smile of encouragement when he faced a challenge. These moments, though seemingly insignificant, spoke volumes. They were signs that something was beginning to form between them, something that neither of them could ignore. But just as the attraction seemed to reach its peak, both of them were forced to confront the truth. Could they move beyond their past, beyond the hurt and the pride that had kept them apart? Could they build something real? Something that transcended the complications of their history? The man, despite the growing feelings he had for her, was hesitant. He feared that allowing himself to fall for her again would only lead to heartbreak. The woman, on the other hand, was conflicted by her own emotions. She didn't want to lose the power she had built, but at the same time, she couldn't deny the way he made her feel. She found herself asking questions she had never asked before. What would it mean to let go of her ego? What would it mean to be vulnerable, to admit that she was drawn to him? As the days passed, the tension between them reached a boiling point. Neither of them could deny the feelings they had for each other. But they were both afraid of what those feelings might mean. Would they be able to navigate the complexities of their relationship, or would their pasts get in the way? The attraction between them was undeniable, but it was still unclear whether it would lead to something lasting. What was clear, however, was that the emotional bond they shared was growing stronger with each passing day. This moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. A chapter where they would have to confront their feelings, their fears, and their pasts in order to move forward. Would they allow themselves to fall for each other, or would they let their egos and insecurities drive them apart once again? Only time would tell. But for now, the attraction between them was undeniable, and their journey was just beginning. The air between them had shifted completely. What had once been an undercurrent of attraction, building slowly and tentatively, now felt palpable. The tension had become too much to ignore. They had spent countless days together, their connection growing stronger and more complex with each passing interaction. The man and the woman had reached a point where their unresolved feelings could no longer be kept in the shadows. Neither of them could deny it any longer. Something had changed between them, and it was undeniable. For the man, the realization was difficult. He had spent so much of his life buried in ambition, in proving his worth to the world, that he had never allowed himself to truly feel love. The deep scars from his past, the years of rejection, and the struggles he had faced in trying to rebuild his life, had left him wary of vulnerability. He had grown accustomed to the idea of being alone, of trusting only himself. And now, here he was, feeling something he had never expected. His feelings for her were real, but they also terrified him. But what scared him most wasn't just the idea of opening himself up to someone. It was the fear of her rejecting him once more. The woman had humiliated him in the past, and had looked down upon him when he had nothing. Could he risk putting his heart on the line for someone who had once believed he wasn't worthy of her? For the woman, the internal battle was equally intense. She had always been in control, her pride and ego standing as barriers between her and anyone who might threaten her carefully constructed life. She had built walls around herself, each brick placed deliberately to protect her from getting hurt. But with him, things were different. As much as she wanted to remain in control, she couldn't deny the feelings that had grown over time. The connection between them was real, and she felt something for him, something more than she had ever felt before. But how could she admit it? How could she let go of the persona she had carefully curated all these years and show him the truth of her feelings? The turning point came one evening, when they found themselves alone, away from the eyes of the world. The man, overwhelmed by the emotions he had been suppressing, finally reached a breaking point. He couldn't keep pretending anymore. The weight of the attraction, the connection, and the fear had become too much for him to carry. He had to say it. He had to finally admit what had been building inside him for so long. The setting was intimate. Just the two of them. No distractions. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating, as they stood facing each other. The woman, sensing something was different in the air, couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment. The moment he would finally say the words she had both dreaded and longed to hear. "I can't keep doing this," the man said, his voice unsteady but firm. "I can't keep pretending like everything is fine when it's not. I've tried to fight this, but I can't fight it anymore. I care about you, more than I ever thought I could." The woman froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't expected him to speak so directly, so openly. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. She didn't know how to react. Her ego told her to shut him down, to protect herself from the vulnerability he was offering. But deep down, another part of her was moved. She had always known he was different, and now, hearing him confess his feelings made something inside her stir. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room was filled with tension, but it was different now. It wasn't the usual tension of avoidance or unspoken words. It was a raw, honest, and vulnerable silence. The man's confession had pierced through the walls they had both spent so long building, and now, they were standing at the edge of something uncertain, but real. "I didn't expect this," the woman finally said, her voice softer than usual. "I didn't expect to feel the way I do, and I didn't expect you to feel the same." She took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was the moment of truth. This was where everything changed. She could either continue to hide behind her pride and push him away, or she could take a step into the unknown. She knew that opening up to him would mean letting go of the control she had so carefully maintained for years. It would mean being vulnerable, and that terrified her. But as she looked at him, standing there with his heart laid bare before her, something in her shifted. She had spent so long running from her emotions, afraid of what they might reveal about her. But now, with him standing before her, she realized something profound. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to always be in control. Maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let go. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm scared of what this means, but I'm willing to try. I think I care about you too." The words were out there now. They had both confessed what had been hidden for so long, and the weight that had hung over them for so long seemed to lift, if only for a moment. But that moment was a turning point. It was the beginning of something new. It was the moment when the walls began to fall, and the possibility of a future together became real. In the silence that followed, something shifted between them. They were no longer the man and the woman who had once been bitter enemies, who had hurt each other with words and actions. They were two people standing on the brink of something new. A relationship that had the potential to change everything if they were both brave enough to face it. This moment would forever mark the turning point in their journey. The man had admitted his feelings, and the woman, despite her fears, had allowed herself to be vulnerable in return. What came next was uncertain, but they had both taken the first step toward something deeper, something more meaningful than either of them had ever expected. The tension that had been building between them finally reached its breaking point. But now, it was time to shift gears. What once felt like a battleground of emotions, pride, and unresolved issues was beginning to change. Both the man and the woman stood at a crossroads. The journey of their relationship had been anything but easy, filled with misunderstandings, pride, pain, and the ghosts of their pasts. But here, in this moment, they faced something crucial: the opportunity for a new beginning. The man's confession, followed by the woman's vulnerability, had cracked open the walls that had kept them apart for so long. However, there was still one thing that remained unresolved: the past. The hurt, the humiliation, the mistakes they had made, both towards each other and themselves. How could they move forward when the weight of everything that had happened was still so fresh? Could they forgive each other and themselves, or would the scars of their past keep them in a perpetual cycle of distrust? Forgiveness is not an easy thing. It requires humility, acceptance, and, most importantly, vulnerability. Both had hurt each other in different ways, but the one thing they had never truly given each other was a chance to heal. The woman had humiliated him when he was at his lowest, and the man had refused to show any sign of weakness when all he wanted was to be seen as worthy. Now, as they stood together, facing the possibility of something deeper, the question lingered. Could they forgive each other for the pain they had caused? Could they move past the old versions of themselves and embrace the possibility of building something new, something stronger? For the woman, this was the hardest pill to swallow. Her ego, which had always served as her shield, now felt like an obstacle. She had spent years building a life where she controlled everything, where vulnerability was seen as weakness. Admitting that she had wronged him, and more importantly, forgiving herself for the pain she had caused, was a challenge that she didn't know how to face. Her pride told her to hold on to the past, to not let him in. But deep down, she knew that if they were ever going to move forward, she had to let go of her need to always be right. She had to face the fact that she had hurt him, and that pain was still present between them. Forgiveness wasn't just for him. It was something she needed for herself. As for the man, his battle was just as real. The years of struggle, the humiliations, and the constant feeling of inadequacy had left deep scars. While he had shown courage in revealing his feelings, the truth was that he had been running from his pain for so long that he hadn't taken the time to deal with it. The woman's actions had triggered the deepest parts of his insecurities, and though he had tried to bury them, they still lingered. His mind had long been consumed by thoughts of revenge, of proving himself, of getting back at those who had belittled him. But now, as he stood there, feeling something he never expected, love, he realized that revenge wasn't the answer. It was forgiveness. It was the ability to let go of the past and move forward. Together. They needed to face the truth of their pain before they could truly move forward. The man understood this, and so, for the first time in his life, he lowered his guard. He wasn't going to make the same mistake again of pretending to be someone he wasn't. Or worse, pretending that the hurt didn't matter. "I can't pretend anymore," he admitted, his voice soft but steady. "I've spent too long hiding my pain, acting like everything's fine. But it's not. The way you treated me before, it hurt. It still does. But I can't keep holding on to that anger. I can't keep letting it control me. I want us to move forward. But I need you to understand that forgiveness, for me, isn't just about letting go of what happened. It's about letting go of the past, of the way I thought I had to be. I need to be real with you, with myself, and I need you to be real with me, too." His words hung in the air, heavy with honesty. The woman, her heart racing, finally allowed herself to be vulnerable. The emotional walls she had spent so long building around herself began to crumble. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to be perfect, to have everything figured out. "I hurt you," she said, her voice filled with remorse. "I humiliated you. And I'm sorry. I was scared. Scared of being vulnerable, scared of losing control. But I see now that I can't keep living in that fear. I can't keep holding on to the past." The weight of those words, the simple but profound act of apologizing, was the turning point. Forgiveness wasn't just something they offered to each other. It was something they gave themselves. For the woman, it was the realization that she didn't have to be in control all the time. For the man, it was understanding that he didn't need to be defined by his past struggles. The truth was that they had both been broken in their ways. But through forgiveness, they could heal. They stood there, both emotionally raw, but also free. Free from the burden of their past mistakes. Free from the chains of fear and insecurity that had kept them from truly being together. Forgiveness wasn't a magic fix. It was a process. It was a choice to let go of what they couldn't change and to move forward. Together. In that moment, they both knew that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, but this was their chance for a fresh start. They were no longer bound by their past. They were ready to embrace the future, with all its uncertainties, as a team. Their new beginning was just that, a new beginning, not defined by the mistakes they had made, but by the love they now shared. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as long as they had each other, they were ready to face whatever came next. With forgiveness came the possibility of everything else, the possibility of trust, of love, of building something that neither of them had thought possible. This was the start of something new, something beautiful, and they were both willing to leap together. They had taken the first step toward their future, a future that was no longer defined by pain or fear, but by the strength they had found in each other and themselves. As the couple takes their first steps towards healing and building a life together, the outside world begins to take notice. What was once a personal journey is now under the watchful eyes of the public, and the media, hungry for a scandalous story, starts to dig deeper into their pasts. The woman who once lived a life of privacy and control is now thrust into a world where every move she makes is scrutinized. The man, who has spent years hiding his struggles, now finds himself exposed to the world in a way he never imagined. The scrutiny feels suffocating, and the pressure from the media threatens to pull apart everything they've worked so hard to build. The first whispers of the media's interest in their relationship begin to surface when an anonymous tip about their past surfaces in a tabloid. The woman's history of humiliation, coupled with her new romantic involvement with the man she once humiliated, becomes a source of intense media fascination. Gossip columns explode with rumors, speculating about their past and future together. The man's rise from humble beginnings to a position of power makes him an ideal subject for the media, and the media quickly focuses on the contrast between their current status and their troubled history. What was once an intimate, private relationship becomes the subject of public fascination, and with every headline, the pressure mounts. The man is shocked by the intense media scrutiny. For years, he had been hiding his pain, his past, and his vulnerabilities from the world. Now, everything is exposed. The tabloids paint him as the underdog who rose from the ashes, but they also portray his relationship with the woman as one of opportunism, betrayal, and revenge. He feels the weight of the public's judgment bearing down on him. What he had once believed to be a fresh start is now threatened by the very thing he tried to escape, being labeled and defined by others. On the other hand, the woman feels a sense of guilt and vulnerability. The media portrays her as a heartless figure, someone who humiliated a man only to later fall in love with him. The portrayal is cruel and unforgiving, and every headline cuts deeper into the image she had worked so hard to protect. She finds herself trapped between two conflicting worlds: her desire for a private, quiet life with the man she loves, and the unrelenting pressure of public opinion. Her past actions are being re-examined, and she's haunted by the idea that her reputation will never be the same. As the media frenzy escalates, the couple faces challenges both individually and as a couple. They struggle with how to handle the public's perception of their relationship. The woman, who had once believed she could control every aspect of her life, finds herself powerless against the media. She's forced to confront the consequences of her past actions and how they will impact her future. For the man, the situation presents an entirely new challenge. His rise to success had been hard-earned, but now that success comes with a price, his personal life is no longer private. The media doesn't just focus on their relationship, but digs into their pasts, exposing details that were once buried. The woman's past mistakes, including her treatment of the man, are brought to light, and her attempts to distance herself from that version of herself seem futile. The man's transformation from an underdog to a powerful figure is scrutinized, and the world questions whether his relationship with her is genuine or driven by a desire for revenge. In the midst of the media storm, the couple must decide how to move forward. Do they continue to keep their relationship in the public eye, or do they retreat into privacy to protect their growing bond? The media has the power to shape public perception, and the couple knows that every move they make will be closely watched and analyzed. The pressure begins to take its toll on both of them, and cracks in their once strong relationship start to show. The man feels conflicted about his desire for privacy and his growing need to defend their relationship publicly. The woman, too, struggles with how to reconcile her desire for a fresh start with the harsh judgment she faces in the media. As the media frenzy intensifies, both the woman and the man must confront the harsh reality that public opinion can be just as destructive as their past mistakes. They must navigate the complex terrain of public scrutiny, while also attempting to protect the fragile bond they've worked so hard to build. The media has a powerful influence, and they are left questioning whether the love they have for each other is strong enough to withstand the weight of public judgment. The tension rises as the couple faces mounting pressure from all sides. They must learn to trust each other more than ever before, relying on their bond to navigate the relentless media storm. But can they overcome the outside forces that threaten to tear them apart? Or will the public's perception of their relationship be enough to shatter the fragile peace they've fought so hard to achieve? As the media frenzy grows, both the woman and the man are forced to make tough decisions about how they will handle their relationship in the public eye. They must find a balance between their love for each other and the expectations placed on them by the outside world. The next chapter in their story depends on their ability to confront their pasts, deal with the pressure of the media, and ultimately decide what kind of future they want to build, both privately and publicly. The weight of their pasts continues to hover over the couple, yet a newfound understanding begins to form between them. Their relationship has survived the media frenzy, the judgment, and the weight of their individual histories. But a deeper, more intimate struggle emerges: trust. Both of them have been hurt before, both by the other and by their own mistakes, and now they find themselves in a position where they must choose to either lean on one another or risk losing everything they've fought for. The woman, once so proud and dependent, must come to terms with the fact that she can't control everything, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. Her past actions, once a shield she could use to protect herself, are now nothing but scars that she must learn to embrace if she is ever to move forward. She spent so many years running from the truth, from the reality of what she did, and now the man is the only one who truly knows her. Flaws, mistakes and all. It's terrifying for her to be this vulnerable. But the secret they share, the painful knowledge of their pasts, is slowly building a bridge between them. For the man, trust has always been a difficult concept. He's been betrayed, humiliated, and mistreated for most of his life. And as much as he has grown from his experiences, the fear of being hurt again lingers. But with the woman, he sees something different. She is not just the woman who humiliated him. She is someone who has suffered too, someone who has been scarred by the very same world that once belittled him. Their shared pain becomes a silent language between them, a bond that speaks louder than words. Yet trust does not come easily, and both must wrestle with their own demons. The man is still grappling with the bitterness of the past, wondering whether the woman's feelings for him are real, or simply a consequence of guilt and public scrutiny. Is she truly capable of love, or is she just trying to make up for her past mistakes? For the woman, the struggle is about letting go of her need to be in control and her desire to protect herself from further hurt. She has spent so many years hiding behind walls, and now, in the face of this complex, unpredictable relationship, she must decide whether she is willing to let someone in, to truly trust someone again. As their connection deepens, so does their understanding of one another. But trust is a slow-blooming flower, delicate, fragile, and easily crushed under pressure. The shared secret they hold, of how they've hurt each other, how they've come together despite everything, is both a bond and a barrier. It's a secret that makes them stronger, but also keeps them distant, as neither of them knows fully how to be vulnerable without fear of betrayal. Every conversation, every gesture, becomes a test of whether they can trust one another with the parts of themselves they've kept hidden. The man's growing feelings for the woman are complicated by his need for clarity. He doesn't just want to be with her out of revenge or guilt. He wants to know that her feelings are authentic and that the love she's offering him is real, not just a reaction to her past mistakes. For the woman, the question is whether she can trust herself again, whether she can open up fully without the fear of rejection or judgment. The shared secret forces them to confront the raw truth of who they are, individually and together. They must learn to navigate the delicate balance between forgiveness, vulnerability, and healing. The secret becomes not just something they share with each other, but something they share with themselves. It's a constant reminder of how far they've come and how much further they still need to go. As they work through their issues, they find that trust is built in small moments. Like when the man lets down his guard, showing her a side of himself he's never shown anyone before. Or when the woman opens up about her fears and her past, her walls crumbling little by little. The journey of learning to trust each other becomes a quiet yet powerful transformation for both of them. In the end, they find that the key to moving forward is not just learning to trust one another, but learning to trust themselves. The shared secret, once a heavy burden, slowly becomes the foundation for a new chapter in their relationship. It's a journey of healing, of opening up, and of letting go of the past in order to embrace the future they've always dreamed of. Together, they begin to understand that love is not about perfection or the absence of mistakes, but about the willingness to be vulnerable, to be honest, and to trust, no matter how difficult the road may seem. Their shared secret has brought them closer, but the real test is whether they can continue to trust each other with their hearts, their hopes, and their future. Will the love they've fought for survive, or will the weight of their past be too heavy to bear? Only time will tell, but for now, they have each other, and that is enough to begin anew. Everything has led to this moment, the journey of pain, redemption, trust, and love. But just when it seems like they have finally started to build something real, the ultimate test arrives, shaking their fragile bond to its core. The man, now deeply in love, still has lingering doubts. He wonders if the woman's feelings for him are strong enough to withstand what's coming next. He has built his empire from nothing, but now he realizes that love is the one thing he cannot control. His wealth and power mean nothing if the woman he loves cannot stand beside him with certainty. And for her, the woman who once looked down on him, she now faces her battle. Can she truly let go of her past, her pride, and her fear of vulnerability to embrace a future with him? Just when they both start to believe that love will conquer all, something happens that threatens to tear them apart. A new scandal erupts. Perhaps someone from her past, an old lover who wants her back, or a journalist who uncovers the truth about her humiliation of him years ago. The media is ruthless, twisting the story to make it seem as if she's only with him out of guilt or for money. Headlines spread like wildfire. Gold digger or true love? From rags to riches, did she plan this all along? The man, who has spent years proving himself to the world, finds himself questioning everything. Did she ever really love him? Or was this all just an elaborate redemption arc for her? His insecurities resurface, and the woman, who has already fought so much to earn his trust, finds herself pushed into a corner. She feels like she's back to where she started, misunderstood, judged, and unworthy. But this time, she refuses to run. This time, she chooses to fight. Instead of breaking down, she takes control of the situation, facing the accusations head-on. She makes a public statement, not to defend herself, but to show the world, and the man she loves, that her feelings are real. That no matter what anyone thinks, she is here to stay. But the real test isn't about the media. The real test is between them. The man, despite everything, must make the hardest decision of his life. Will he let his fears dictate his future, or will he trust in the love they've built? He watches her, sees the fire in her eyes, the determination in her stance, and for the first time, he realizes something powerful. The woman who once humiliated him has changed. She is not the same person who broke his heart all those years ago. She is someone new, someone who has learned, grown, and fought for love. And for the first time, he understands that love is not about perfection. It's about choice, about believing in someone despite the fears, despite the past, despite what the world thinks. In the final test of their love, he does not hesitate. He steps forward, takes her hand, and makes the choice that will define the rest of their lives. He chooses her. Against the odds, against the doubts, against the noise of the world, he chooses love. And in that moment, she knows that everything they have endured has been worth it. The ultimate test has been passed. The only thing left now is to see what the future holds. But for now, they stand together, ready to face whatever comes next. Because for the first time, they are truly a team. The storm has passed, and for the first time, they stand side by side, not as adversaries, not as people haunted by their past mistakes, but as two individuals who have fought their battles and emerged stronger together. The media, the scandals, the doubts, all of it fades into the background as they realize what truly matters. Their love, their journey, and the life they are about to build together. The woman, once prideful and guarded, now understands the depth of her own emotions. She has spent so long running from vulnerability, afraid that admitting her feelings would make her weak. But now, standing beside the man she once humiliated, she sees that love was never about power or control. It was about trust, growth, and the willingness to take risks. And the man, who once let his pain and resentment guide his actions, has finally let go of his need for revenge. What started as a desire to prove himself has transformed into something far greater. He no longer needs validation from the world. He has found something much more valuable. Someone who sees him not for his wealth, not for his power, but for the man he truly is. Their relationship is no longer built on the wounds of the past. It is built on a foundation of understanding, respect, and a shared vision for the future. But their journey is far from over. With their newfound happiness comes the reality of merging their worlds. The woman, who once struggled financially, now finds herself surrounded by a life of luxury. At first, it overwhelms her. The grand mansions, the private jets, the business meetings with powerful executives. It's a world she never imagined herself being a part of. She wonders if she truly belongs. But the man sees her hesitation, and for the first time, he reassures her, not with wealth, not with extravagant gestures, but with something far more meaningful, his unwavering support. It's not about money, he tells her. It's about us. Whatever we build together. Slowly, she begins to settle into this new life, not as an outsider, but as an equal partner. She starts taking an active role in his business, using her intelligence and experience to offer insights he never considered before. She no longer sees herself as someone who was once beneath him. She sees herself as his equal, his partner, his future. And he, in turn, realizes that wealth means nothing if he doesn't have someone to share it with. He watches her adapt, grow, and flourish, and he knows that choosing her was the best decision he has ever made. Together, they start planning their future. The idea of marriage lingers in the air, unspoken but understood. They don't need a grand proposal or an extravagant wedding to prove their love. They have already been through the greatest test of all, choosing each other despite everything. But still, he surprises her. One evening, under the stars, with no cameras, no media, and no outside world watching, he asks her the one question that will change their lives forever. Will you marry me? There is no hesitation, no doubt. She says yes, not because of his wealth, not because of his success, but because she knows that this man, the one she once overlooked, is the only one she will ever love. The wedding is simple yet elegant, a reflection of who they are. It is not about showing off their wealth, but about celebrating the journey that brought them here. Friends and family gather, not just to witness a union but to witness the transformation of two people who once lived in separate worlds, now standing together as one. And as they exchange vows, there is no trace of the past, no lingering resentment, no fear of the future. There is only love, the love that survived humiliation, struggle, doubt, and pain. The love that proved that sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations. Their journey proves that life is unpredictable, that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes fate has a way of bringing two people together, no matter how impossible it seems. But now, it's your turn. Have you ever judged someone too quickly, only to realize later that you were wrong? Or maybe you've experienced a moment in life where someone underestimated you, and you came back stronger than ever. Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your stories. And if this story kept you hooked, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another captivating tale. We have more incredible, emotional, and inspiring stories coming your way. What do you think? Did she deserve a second chance? Would you have forgiven someone who humiliated you in the past? Let us know below. And remember, no matter where you come from, no matter your past, your future is yours to shape. See you in the next story.